Hey there, folks. This is Daniel Fritter from Caliber Magazine. About a month ago, I put an article up on the Caliber Mag website going through the overall spending we've seen from public safety and the RCMP to support things like the Assault Style Firearms Compensation Program, as well as gun reform writ large. Because believe it or not, public safety allocates millions of dollars to changing 3 gun laws per year, and I'm not even making that up. That is an actual stated goal they have. And yes, they do allocate millions of dollars towards achieving it. But I wanted to do a quick video updating that because, well, that article is both comprehensive and lengthy. There's been a new release from public safety last week in the form of their departmental plan for 2025 to 2026, which gives us a bit more detail on what they intend to spend this year and the next few years on the quote-unquote gun buyback, better known now these days as the Assault Style Firearms Compensation Program or Long Gun Ban Confiscation Program, whatever you'd like to call it. And the big figure in all of this is $459.6 million. That's the amount public safety has budgeted towards the Assault Style Firearms Compensation Program in total for the next fiscal year. Now, this is a pretty big departure from the amount previously reported in the Treasury Board's main estimates, as well as broadly reported in the media through various outlets. And that's because when the Treasury Board put out their main estimates document stipulating $342.6 million in support of the Assault Style Firearms Compensation Program, a lot of folks seem to have missed the fact that that was the amount that public safety was budgeting for grants and contributions in transfer payments alone, which is only a portion of the overall program's budget. Now, for those that don't understand the difference between these two numbers, the $342.6 million previously reported and more widely reported up to this point as grants and contributions is the amount of money public safety expects to require this year to transfer to other entities outside of Public Safety Canada. The bulk of this, obviously, is generally accepted to be compensation for the individual owners of newly prohibited firearms. If I recall correctly, it's something about $260 million looks to be earmarked for individual compensation, with the bulk of the remainder being grants and contributions that they will likely make, they being public safety, will likely have to make to provincial partners so that those provinces can pay staff, police forces, firearms officers, whomever is required to support the federal Assault Style Firearms Compensation Program without incurring provincial costs. But like I said, that's only a portion of the overall spending because obviously if you're going to give away $342.6 million to people outside your organization, you probably need to have some administration staff, some oversight, some accountability, what they would call operating expenses, which is the portion that was missing from the Treasury Board's main estimates component. They don't provide such detail. It's not that it was missing, it just wasn't provided. They showed the overall operating expenses, but they didn't break out the amount of operating expenses specifically going to this program. But now we know what that amount is because when you take the $459.6 million that public safety has said this program has been budgeted this year, and you subtract the grants and contributions, you arrive at about $110 million in expected operating expenses that public safety expects to incur, which is on track for, to toot my own horn, on track with what we sort of projected in the article linked in the description below about a month ago on overall spending. But even that, as blistering and eye-watering as that number may be, is not a comprehensive figure because it is, again, only the amount public safety has budgeted towards this program. And although some of that money may flow to other organizations, there are something like 11 different organizations within the federal government supporting the Assault Style Firearms Compensation Program, the most obvious of which is the RCMP, to a slightly lesser degree is the Justice Department, but you've also got Cyber Canada because it's a large IT program. The Privacy Commissioner's Office is involved because it involves a lot of people's private information. Economic and Social Development Canada is in charge of some things. Procurement Services Canada, PSPC, is involved because it involves a lot of procuring of services and contracting. So there are a lot of different components in this that have to contribute to this program's actuation or activation. And we can't really know how much a lot of those programs are costing, or a lot of those contributions are costing. For example, Economic and Social Development Canada may not have a way to extract the amount that the assault style firearms compensation program is costing them. They may simply have staff who are there to support programs like this, and they can't really find out specifically how many hours each individual worked to support this individual program. But nonetheless, when you just take the RCMP number on previous years, like for example, last year when they launched phase one of the program, and the amount of money allocated by public safety through supplementary estimates to support the launch of that, as well as the RCMP spending last year, you can project out how much the RCMP spent, for example, and arrive at a very conservative, like I'm not inflating this whatsoever, I'm just taking what they spent last year and projecting it forward, completely ignoring the fact that phase one of the program, the business portion, only involved a few hundred quote unquote clients, i.e. businesses remitting firearms, not hundreds of thousands of individuals. Projecting that straightforward, you still arrive at a very large figure of $516 million, and that is again the lowest possible estimate of federal spending to support the assault style firearms compensation program in the next fiscal year. When you incorporate historical spending on the program's creation over the last 5 years, you get to a figure that's much closer to $1 billion than otherwise. When you start to incorporate the potential spending in justice and the various other departments, you get very close to $1 billion, most likely. And this is obviously new and uncharted territory, and it is moving this program into the realm of beyond being able to ignore it. We're into this, it has to be confronted by government. We're getting to a point where these figures are becoming so large that it is taking what has historically been considered kind of a niche issue, a specific policy issue that generally is more impactful to special interest groups, be them gun owners or anti-gun lobbyists, but is generally not something that has been on the radar of the average Canadian. However, with the news that the spending this year alone is going to eclipse $500 million, the average cash-strapped Canadian may start taking notice of this, because that number, although hundreds of millions of dollars are thrown around as a term within government and reporting these days far too frequently, is still a huge number. And to put it in context, ArriveCan, which was in recent headlines for that company being barred from future contracting, was a $60 million contract that became a massive national scandal. The so-called Green Slush Fund that brought government to a standstill last year and at least contributed to the downfall of a decade-long Trudeau government, was a $400 million issue raised by the Auditor General. Now we're seeing a program that just within public safety is on paper. This is not prognostication. This is not interpretation. $459 is written. $459.6 million is explicitly written by public safety as the amount that they're using this year, and that number may even increase if they need to get additional funding throughout the year. Is exceeding all of those. For example, additional context. In this age of foreign interference being a growing issue, and I say growing because as recently as a few days ago, CSIS released their annual report in which they indicated that although foreign interference has become a top-tier issue at the forefront of the Canadian psyche, it is still a growing issue. We have not curtailed it in the least. It is the footprint of foreign interference in Canada is expanding as we speak. As that is happening, the entire budget for CSIS, our security and intelligence establishment, the whole organization that is in charge of defending Canada against exactly these sorts of threats and is more relevant today than ever before, has a budget that is roughly double that of the gun confiscation program alone. It's about $1 billion. We're going to spend $500 million seizing guns from licensed gun owners who are among the least likely Canadians to commit a crime ever. More pointedly and more, pursuant to the issue at hand, the mayor of Toronto and Toronto's police chief recently went on record and said that 90% or potentially even more of all firearms involved in violent crime in the city of Toronto are illegal guns smuggled from the United States. And yet, the amount of money that the federal government will budget towards seizing guns from licensed Canadians is roughly the equivalent of the amount of money that they're budgeting to the CBSA for border enforcement this year. It's within spitting distance. $520 or so million for border enforcement, $516 million at least on gun confiscation, which doesn't make a whole lot of sense when you consider that licensed gun owners and the guns that they possess account for an infinitesimally small amount of the overall crime committed or involving a firearm in this country. In terms of what the average Canadian sees on a daily basis and why this issue may become elevated to a point of import amongst the average Canadian is things like, for example, most people have been especially within urban environs, forced to confront a growing issue of substance abuse and addiction issues in Canada. And yet the public health fund that goes towards provinces and the substance abuse and addictions programs that various health authorities put on is 1/3 the amount that is being allocated towards public safety and the assault style firearms compensation program with the RCMP included. They're going to spend 3 times more seizing guns from people that just take them to the range, basically, and compete with them and shoot them for fun, who have not contributed to anything negative in Canadian history. We're going to spend 3 times more on that than we spend trying to get people off of drugs. And again, for added context, in 2023, over 7,000 Canadians died of drug poisonings. And they call them drug poisonings this is a complete non sequitur, but I think it's important for people to recognize. They call them drug poisonings because the people that die from them do not intend to die. An overdose implies a degree of complicity on the part of the user, as in you chose to overdose. These people did not choose to die from the drugs they took. They simply didn't know what was in the drugs. And you can say, for example, a lot of people do, that they shouldn't take them in the first place. That's fine, but that's a very hard line to take. So they call them drug poisonings. 7,000 Canadians, over 7,100 Canadians died in 2023 from drug poisonings. That is a lot of sons, daughters, brothers, sisters, uncles, fathers and mothers, you name it. 7,100 Canadians over in 2023. There was less than 300 people killed by a firearm that same year in Canada. And yet we're spending 3 times more seizing guns from people that didn't even commit the homicides in the first place. It doesn't make any sense. In terms of, to put it in for real sense of scale, we are spending 3.5 times more. That's if they meet their budget, which is, let's just go with it, a snowball's chance in hell that the budget doesn't increase throughout the year. If they manage to hold themselves to the budget that's been put forward right now, and the program hasn't even started yet, they will spend 3.5 times more money on this program than the Senate costs. The entire second rung of our government costs less, significantly less, than what it costs to seize guns from Canadians this year. And let's not forget that on the backdrop of all this, besides the fact that it hasn't worked, people are referring to it these days because it has become an issue on account of some various articles around polling and spending, obviously, which we're discussing now, that they're referring to it as a program that will fail. It has failed. It's been in existence for 5 years, and gun crime is higher than it was when the program launched in 2020. And it's not insignificantly higher. It is quite dramatically higher. Crime overall is higher than it was in 2020. So we can say that it absolutely was a failure, but beyond all that is ignoring the fact that I've heard from some gunners, well, it won't cost a lot because I just won't comply. And if we don't submit our guns, it won't cost a ton of money and then it won't be an issue. That doesn't really work because the government will have to budget money towards the confiscation program to get the compliance rate they want. They have an estimate of how many guns are in Canada, which is the second point I'll get to. And if they want to get a percentage of those guns and claim a compliance rate, they will need to have money in the bank to give you in order to get that gun from you as part of this program, which means they have to have the money in the bank in the first place, which means the money can't go to, for example, a substance abuse program with public health. So it doesn't matter how many people comply, the budget will need to be there regardless. But the second point is that estimate is already been proven completely erroneous. Whatever numbers they're using to get this budget will likely, and the budget will likely have to increase because of this, has been incorrect. As recently as the first quarter of 2024, there was a parliamentary note to the minister stipulating that they believed there to be 9,000 firearms, newly prohibited firearms, in business inventories that would be captured or impacted by phase 1 of this program. In other words, they thought there were 9,000 guns that the ban, the May 1st of 2020 ban, were in business inventories, 9,000 of them. As of April of this year, first quarter of 2025, a year later, they have seized over 12,000 guns, meaning that their compliance rate is 135%, which it shouldn't take a rocket scientist to know is an impossibility. You cannot have an over 100% compliance rate. It indicates that your basic estimate that you're using as the foundation of this entire thing is erroneous. This was raised with public safety, and they simply said, well, yeah, we recognize that the data we're using is 13 years old, and there is a data gap now. So they've recognized that issue, but it is unlikely. That only happened, all of this, the realization their number was off, only happened about a month ago. So it's unlikely that the budget figures, which have been kind of worked on for the last 6 months, are reflective of that erroneous estimation of firearms, which we have brought up numerous times because the notion that there are only 140,000 newly prohibited firearms in this country is laughable. They think there's only 30,000 non-restricted firearms impacted by this regulation. And I can tell you, as someone who worked in the industry during the long gun registry and afterwards, the number of non-restricted firearms that were sold for every AR-15, they say there's 90,000 AR-15s or so, and 30,000 non-AR-15s or 40,000 or so. The non-restricted guns outsold AR-15s by 5 to 10 to 1, depending on your market. So there are dramatically more non-restricted guns impacted by this than there are AR-15s. And the number is likely in excess of even the industry's estimate of over 500,000 guns, because the industry's estimate is based on import certificates, and those records are only available within a certain window of time. And when you're dealing with guns like the Ruger Mini 14 that have been around for decades, a lot of the original importations of those guns are no longer available. The records are long gone, but those guns still exist. And they were very popular back in the day. So chances are even the 500,000 gun figure is dramatically lower, meaning that the budget that the government is using, or the numbers that the government is using to support the budgeted amount, are likely exponentially lower than the realistic amounts in the wild, to use a vernacular, and likely that budget is going to expand even beyond that, which brings to the third point, that this is approaching long gun registry levels of excess, and it's doing so at an accelerated rate that we didn't even see during the long gun registry. For a lot of the new gun owners out there that don't remember the long gun registry, weren't blessed to be around during that particular time. It took 2 years for it to be created. It has been 5 years since this program was launched, and the first phase only began in December. The bulk of it hasn't even started yet. And 14 years after it was announced, the long gun registry was canceled after the Auditor General did a report, and it was found that it was costing excessive amounts of money, well beyond what was originally budgeted. And when it was finally killed off by Stephen Harper and dissembled, the overall cost to the taxpayer had exceeded $2 billion. Now, 5 years in, we're already discussing the potential that this program may have consumed close to or over $1 billion, maybe. It's so close based on what we know it's already consumed. It's close already. If you were to go through all of those various departments, you would probably find it's very, very close to $1 billion. And it hasn't even started yet. The parallels between this and the long gun registry are they're unavoidable, and they simply can't be ignored. And I think that brings us to the final point of the video, which is that if you're a gun owner, you should know this stuff, because this is crucial information, and it is the information that's going to elevate this issue to beyond the reach of our community alone. It's going to make this issue something that the average Canadian cares about, because, well, the average Canadian is not impacted by the Assault Style Firearms Compensation Program. Chances are the average Canadian does interact with another program run by the federal government or funded by the federal government that they are not happy with the performance of, that they think is inadequate, that they may then start to ask questions about why they're spending so much money seizing guns from gun owners instead of funding the program that they interact with. Maybe it's an addictions program for a loved one of theirs. Maybe it's funding for the military and proper payment for the people that enlist. Maybe it's health programs. Maybe it's someone simply asking, why are the health transfers not getting that money instead? Because I can't find a doctor. Here in Kelowna, for example, our pediatrics department is closed for 6 weeks, and we don't even know when it's going to reopen, because there's just chronic underfunding and mismanagement of seemingly every facet of the federal government. So if you are a gun owner, there will be links to all of this stuff in the description below. I'm not going to go on forever. I'm going to try and keep this video shorter. He said it 20 minutes long. There will be links to all of this in the description below. The article where we went through the past spending from a month ago, a link to the departmental plan. So if you're writing a letter to your MP, you can include a direct source, a link to the direct source, because frankly, this number is so big, many people may not believe it. So by all means, provide them with the direct source indicating you're not trying to mislead them. You're not trying to hyperbolize. Public safety is saying right here, they're going to spend this much. You know, when you extrapolate out what the RCMP will have to spend in addition to that, it's very easy. It's undeniable that it'll be over $500 million. We'll put links to all that. There'll be links to other people's coverage of this as well. Gun Blog has done some great work. Juno, Rebel News, all those folks trying to share the love and spread it around so you guys can all learn more about these issues. If you've watched this far and you haven't subscribed, maybe you do so, because if you sat through a 20-minute video and you haven't subscribed to the channel, you might like the rest of the stuff we put out. It's a lot of stuff like this. I'll be doing another video shortly on the reporting coming around eco surveys and stuff, because there's some interesting things around that has some corollaries with this, and it adds some context as well. So by all means, please subscribe if you're subscribed and you liked it. Make sure you click that little bell icon, all the usual YouTuber clips here. And as usual, I will be in the comments below in the immediate future, kind of answering questions. So if you have anything that you want to ask me, head on down there. If you want to support this sort of coverage directly, head on over to calwaremag.ca/subscribe and get yourself a copy of the subscription to the paper magazine we produce. The next one's coming out shortly after Canada Day, because of the Canada Day weekend-ish thing that's happening. I hope everyone likes that. Lots of coverage of this in there, as well as some other stuff, obviously. But if you want to support that, that's the easiest way to do so. We're looking at expanding options for that as well, to doing some Patreon and some exclusive online stuff as well. So look for that over the summer. But obviously changing as the industry has to adapt to this new environment we're in. But most of all, if you have gleaned anything from this, by all means, click those links. Find out who your MP is, if you've got a new one especially. Doesn't matter if they're NDP, unlikely though that may be, Bloc Québécois, because the Bloc Québécois would probably like this funding to go to Quebec's interests, or a Liberal even, and obviously the Conservatives, that you contact your MP in some way. Send them an email, provide them with this information and say, were you aware of the fact that this program is going to be accruing more money? For example, you can use this stat, with the amount of money, $516 million, and projected $459 that they've freely admitted on public safety, this program is going to receive more funding than 80 of the 130, I believe it was, overall programs the government has. So if you go to that Treasury Board document, they list every single thing the federal government is going to fund. Every ministry, every department, fisheries, natural resources, you name it, it is on that document. I think there's about 130 or so different departments getting funding. The amount of money being awarded to the Assault Style Firearms Compensation Program the next fiscal year exceeds the total amount of spending 80 of those organizations are going to get. Over half of the programs operated by our federal government will get less funding overall, and we're talking entire ministries here, like the Ministry of Women, etc., are going to get significantly less money than this individual program within public safety alone. It's that big. Tell that to your MP. Make sure that they're aware of this. Bring it to their attention. If there's an issue in your particular area that could use additional funding but is not available, great opportunity to bring that up. Say, hey, look, we've got significant substance abuse and addiction issues in our area. We don't get enough funding from Public Health Canada. Maybe we should look at appropriating funds out of this, canceling this program, putting that one on. Present it as a solution, not a problem. That's what MPs like to see. If you want to go a bit above and beyond, try and ask for a telephone call with your MP. An in-person meeting is great, and lots of MPs will oblige that. If they won't, most of them will make time for a quick phone call. They're very busy, especially in the summertime. They're glad-handing, and then during the rest of the year, they're going back and forth to Ottawa. But most of them will make time for a phone call, and it means that they can do it when they're in Ottawa or in your jurisdiction as well. So see if you can do that. Anything you can do to elevate the issue beyond the level of import that a normal email sort of communicates would be good. But by all means, get in touch with them, raise this issue. I'm not even sure, to be quite frank, if the government knows, like MPs who are recently recruited. I don't think many of them know that this is becoming such a major issue. And I suspect that a lot of them aren't aware of the past history with the long gun registry and how similar this looks to that. There's a great quote from Justin Trudeau in 2012, actually, believe it or not, when he was approached by the CBC, and he explicitly said the long gun registry is a failure because it was so reviled. It was seen as such an example of government excessive spending for no purpose. And he even continued in that interview, paraphrasing here, saying that the long gun registry was effectively government using gun policy to separate people, divide a wedge, divide them for political gain, and that political parties shouldn't do that. So if Justin Trudeau, somewhat ironically and perhaps with the advantage of hindsight hypocritically, could see that in 2012 and learn that lesson, perhaps the governing Liberals of today can perhaps learn it a bit faster than it took the Liberals of yore. Either way, it's something that we want to raise with all of our elected officials. So that's the big lesson here. By all means, please get in contact with your MP and make them aware of this. Tell your fellow gun owners, share this with them so everyone knows how expensive this is going to be. Like, comment, subscribe, and I will see you guys on the next video. Thanks for watching.